Welcome. I'm super excited. This is the first book club out of the quarterly book club for the ICA's Health and Wellness Committee. And while the committee was talking about which book to shed light upon first, this was the majority of the committee said, let's bring Jackie and Shawn's book. So I'm super excited that we could do that. And I'm even more excited that the authors are on the call with us today. So you all get the inside scoop of body mapping for clarinetists, new frontiers in clarinet teaching. I'm Aileen Raisey, and I will host tonight's discussion with Jackie and Shawn, which will be followed by a Q&A where you can all unmute yourself and ask your burning questions to the authors. If you think of some questions before, feel free to just drop them in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat as we go. And then to be sure that everyone can properly hear this discussion, if you don't mind just leaving yourself muted for now, and then when you have questions to ask, then by all means, you can totally unmute yourself. We're planning for this book to last for 1 hour, so just a heads up as you are planning. Before we dive into this long-awaited discussion, I just wanted to share the authors' bios to remind all of us of the incredible contributions that both Jackie and Shawn have been giving to the clarinet community and to the musical and artistic community. And if you'd like to read more, their bios can also be found in the back of the book that we're discussing tonight. I'll start with Shawn's bio. Shawn Copeland is a pioneer in the fields of musician wellness and performance training. His innovative, creative, and transformational approach has set him apart as a multidimensional musician, pedagogue, and entrepreneur. His unique methods have established him as a leader, culminating in the founding of Embodied LLC, a company that is reshaping the landscape of performance training for musicians, actors, and dancers. An accredited teacher and esteemed clinician, Shawn masterfully fuses the Alexander technique and body mapping with an array of somatic modalities, including somatic trauma therapy and integrative somatic coaching. His journey into this holistic world began in 1997 at the Brevard Music Center, igniting a lifelong passion for inclusive and dynamic teaching. He believes that the body is an integral part of the creative process, and he cultivates nurturing spaces where individuals can explore their full potential. His unique pedagogy validates lived experiences and champions growth, having transformed the lives of countless musicians struggling with performance-related challenges. With an entrepreneurial spirit and a wealth of teaching experiences, Shawn is a sought-after clinician, captivating audiences at masterclasses and conferences nationwide. He currently chairs the Committee on Health, Access, and Well-Being for the College Music Society, reflecting his unwavering commitment to these essential values. As a training mentor and chair of the Diversity and Belonging Committee with the Association of Body Mapping Education, he actively promotes inclusion and equity in the arts. His influence extends to leadership roles in Alexander Technique International, where he serves as a sponsoring teaching member and on the Ethics Advisory Committee. An accomplished author, Shawn is the co-author of Body Mapping for Clarinetists, Breathing for Clarinetists, and the highly anticipated The Embodied Breath, Body Mapping, Breathing, Balance, and Belonging. He boasts an impressive academic background, holding a Doctor of Musical Arts and a Master of Music from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, a Bachelor of Music from Stetson University, and a Master of Arts in Nonprofit Art Management from the University of Central Florida. Additionally, he has earned advanced certificates in diversity, equity, and inclusion from Cornell University, somatic trauma therapy from the Embodied Lab, and performing arts injury prevention education from the Performing Arts Medical Association. Currently, he is pursuing a Master Somatic Practitioner certification with the Integrative Wellness Academy, further solidifying his expertise. Shawn is a performing artist and clinician for prestigious brands such as Buffet Crampon, Gonzalez Reeds, and Silverstein. With his remarkable passion and depth of knowledge, Shawn Copeland is genuinely reshaping the future of performing arts. And Jackie. Jackie is a passionate clarinet pedagogue whose innovative teaching infuses principles of body mapping and Alexander technique, providing fresh ideas and perspectives that not only help her students grow musically, but also challenge them to incorporate their whole selves into their music. Jackie has been at the University of Southern Mississippi since 2013 and currently serves as Associate Professor of Clarinet. She keeps an active performing schedule with solo, chamber, and orchestral appointments that have taken her across the country and abroad as guest artist and soloist. She has performed recitals at international conferences, including Clarinet Fest, Association for Body Mapping Education's Biennial Conference, and the International Trombone Association Festival, to name a few. She performs with the Mississippi Symphony Orchestra, Meridian Symphony Orchestra, Lucent Trio, and Magnolia Reed Trio, and can be heard on 2 albums. Her teaching has brought her to Panama City, Bogota, Colombia, and the Fine Arts Summer Academy in Nashville, Tennessee. After recovering from a near career-ending injury with the help of somatic practices, Alexander technique, and body mapping, Jackie dedicated herself to bringing this material into music education. She's a licensed body mapping educator and is a training mentor for the Association for Body Mapping Education. She has artfully woven these practices into her daily clarinet pedagogy and has been a desired presenter at international, national, and state conferences and a featured guest for music organizations. Body mapping seminars and presentations have been sponsored by organizations such as the ICA, Association for Body Mapping Education, Florida Music Educators Association, Texas Christian University, and University of Arizona, to name a few of those. Her continual pursuit of studying the body for integration into music education is a continual process and led Jackie to complete the Essentials of Performing Arts Medicine course certification offered by the Performing Arts Medicine Association and American College of Sports Medicine. Her fruitful partnership with fellow licensed body mapping educator Shawn Copeland has resulted in 2 books, Body Mapping for Clarinetists, which we'll share with you tonight, and The Embodied Breath, Body Mapping, Balancing, and Breathing for Musicians. They've presented materials from their books at the ICA Clarinet Fest and the Midwest Clinic. Jackie received her doctorate of musical arts from the Florida State University, Master of Music from Indiana University, and Bachelor of Music from Middle Tennessee State University. She's a buffet crampen performing artist and Vendoran artist clinician. It is clear that both Jackie and Shawn have such great expertise and experience to share. So, without further ado, let's jump in to tonight's discussion. So Jackie and Shawn, for the audience members that are here today who might not have read your book, your entire book yet, I think that they'll have a better understanding by the time we're done chatting tonight. But do you have a 30-second elevator pitch that you can share?
I'll go first. So first of all, thank you so much for having me here. It is absolutely lovely to be here and to be able to talk with you all about this book. It's something obviously that Shawn and I are very passionate about. But back to the elevator pitch, which I probably already used up 30 seconds. But anyway, I would say that our book is, it's kind of a workbook that invites you to explore yourself physically, emotionally, and musically. And it also helps you to integrate your body and your music so that you can communicate with the audience better, feel more confident on stage, and have more control while performing.
I will also echo, thank you for having both of us here, and so honored that we're the first for this inaugural venture. Let's see, what can I add? Because that's pretty much my 30-second. This book is about what we do as clarinetists and as people, as human beings, from the nitty-gritty to how we move our fingers, to how we're feeling, to how we balance our lives as artists, as teachers, as performers, and as human beings, how we put all of that together.
Thank you so much for that. I hope anyone who hasn't read it is now really excited to order their copy. Can you both share a little bit about how this project became into being and the process of both of you co-writing, co-authoring this book?
Sure. I'll take that one, Jackie. That um, I was contacted by Barbara Conable, who founded what is now the Association of Body Mapping Education. Goodness, 25 years ago is probably when she did that. She contacted me in 2007, right after I had finished my doctorate. My dissertation was on body mapping in the clarinet studio and clarinet pedagogy, and she had asked me to adapt that into um, the clarinet version of the series, What Every Musician Needs to Know About the Body. So it would have been What Every Clarinetist Needs to Know About the Body. And I worked on that for many, 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 many years, and really couldn't get anywhere. Part of it was that, I was a fresh teacher and I didn't really feel like I knew enough to write a book, because I felt like I was basically talking about what my teachers had said as opposed to what I thought was needed to be said, and how I was going to say it, how I was teaching it. But also, I'm a teacher, and I couldn't. I felt like I was just sitting here typing to no one, without a problem to solve. So it was a very strange experience for me. Um, and goodness, about 2014, 15, Jackie. Um, I
Sure.
I met Jackie at the Van Doren, one of the first Van Doren clarinet choir festivals. And I believe it was actually in Mobile. Um, and found out that she was a body mapping educator. And we became friends and started working together. And then at the Clarinet Fest in Tennessee, I sent her a message and said, "Hey, do you have 5 minutes? I need to talk to you." Which of course is that ominous, like, oh, what did I do? Um, and I said, "How would you like to co-author this book with me? I think that we could really do something pretty special here." Um, and of course, she said yes, thankfully. And then the pandemic happened, and it gave us the time to figure out how to sit down and write together. We quite literally spent hours on Zoom going, okay, you teach, let me type. And we would talk to each other about how we teach this while the other person was typing it. And then we go, oh, wait, no, explain that a little bit more. Skipped a little bit, like, and so it was this really great synergistic kind of approach to writing together in real time, like we were having a conversation with each other, and like we would explain this to our students. Um, and we really wanted to capture that in the book, where we actually, sometimes we're talking about our opinion about this, but if we have different approaches, we split apart and use our initials to give our different ideas about this. We really wanted to present it in a way that, like, this isn't the right way. This is just a way. Find your own path through this material. So 5 years later, it was finally done. It took 17 years to write total from beginning to end. Yeah. Uh,
And we started
so
from scratch. I mean, Shawn, you had this wonderful document that you wrote for your dissertation, and we kind of like looked at it together, and we were like, maybe we just need a fresh approach. And so, I mean, of course, we referenced it at times, but also we just decided, like, okay, let's just start at square one. What do you think? And so it was really this collaboration that was really special, and just kind of kept developing.
That's really special. I think anyone who writes can kind of relate to the fact that we don't know necessarily, like, we're not writing to anyone. We don't have an audience at that moment when we're writing. And so I feel like this is a really unique way to be able to capture the action in the moment and the teaching in the moment. And
Mhm.
I agree. I think that comes out really well in the book too. Um, Jackie, I'm going to direct the next question towards you. So you mentioned that you were introduced to Alexander technique and body mapping by your professor once you were experiencing numbness and pain in your playing. And it seems really common that many artists don't know about or do not take interest in working with Alexander or body mapping until they have to or until they approach a challenge or an injury in their playing. So for anyone who's lucky enough to not have had an injury at all in their playing, can you share a little bit about what body mapping and Alexander lessons might look like? And also, if there's any language that we might need to know or definitions that we might need to know for this conversation, could you take a moment to define some of those too?
Sure. So, in a typical body mapping lesson, um, normally someone would come in and you would discuss like what issues are you having, like, or just like your general performance experience and how you feel about your playing. And, is there anything that's bothering you? No, that's okay. And then the student would play a little bit, and it could be anything. It can be a warm up, it can be a solo with a million notes, it can be a warm up. It doesn't matter. You just play something, and then that's when the process starts. I'm sure that some teachers have a specific curriculum that they'll take through their private students, one thing at a time. But in general, the somatic practices, it's more fluid than that. It's less curriculum based and more experience based. So what are you experiencing? What are you noticing? What are you seeing? Okay, great. This is what I'm seeing. What do you think about that? Like why do you do this? And so there's a conversation that starts. And for body mapping, we're trained specifically to find like where are the places in which you are still. If you are still while you're playing, like a certain area, that generally means that there's probably some tension in that area as you're playing. And so we kind of dive in. That's our first point that we really dive in, just in general. Now, keep in mind, everyone teaches these things differently and everyone has a different approach, and that's okay. This is something that I've kind of experienced a lot as a student, but also as a teacher. And it seems to work really well. So generally we will kind of talk through something. We'll dive into the body mapping aspect. We'll try to embody it physically before we get the instrument again. So before I get the clarinet again, I want to experience this in my body. Where are my hips in my body? How do my hips move? Okay, great. Now once I got a good hold on that, then I'll bring the clarinet to it and I'll kind of play around with that with my hips as I'm playing a long tone or some warm ups or a scale pattern. And you can kind of graduate yourself through difficulty levels if you feel the need. But that once you bring it back to the instrument, like that would kind of be a good place to wrap it up and allow that person who is just working through some of these things to go into the practice room and really kind of play around with the new ideas. That's just kind of general how I would structure, and I've seen a lot of body mapping and Alexander techniques lessons structured. There are other possibilities. My first exposure to Alexander and body mapping was actually through a group class. So there was, I think, 8 or 9 of us. And so there's benefits to that too. We were able to have conversations and relate to each other. We were able to see how body mapping would change the alignment of someone else or change their approach or change their sound quality. So we were able to give feedback a lot as well. And I do agree that it tends to be a marketing aspect of somatics, is that, I'll help you with injury prevention. That can be the first thing that we think of. That seems really grabbing to an audience. However, the longer that I do this, the more I realize that it's more than just injury prevention. It's also getting to know myself, getting to know my instrument, getting to know my emotions and how they relate to music, and ultimately being able to communicate with the audience at a deeper level. So I'm really grateful for it, for that, for sure. But I think it would be great if we could all have some exposure and some interest in somatics.
I'm gonna jump ahead to another question that I had that relates to this. How, for both of you, how do you feel like, as someone who's training as a clarinetist or someone who's training to be a clarinet teacher or professor, how do you imagine the curriculum for learning about body mapping and Alexander? How do you imagine the info that you have in this book gets out into the and gets shared with the clarinet community and beyond?
I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of what Jackie was saying, kind of pick up right where she was at and say, um, and also reiterate, it's a real marketing error that somatics in general, body mapping, Alexander technique, body mind centering, anything that falls within the somatic arts is marketed as injury recovery and injury prevention. It really is performance enhancement. If you want a deeper connection to your creative impulse, if you want a direct connection from creativity to output without any interference in your body, that's what somatics can give you. And so, and some people, will often say, well, I don't have an injury. Why would I need this? Well, are you interested in doing what you do right now easier? Would you like to have less tension? Would you like to have more energy at the end of the day? Would you like to hurt less? Would you like to do it with less effort? You can. And if you can do it with the amount of effort that you're doing right now, you can do it with less. In terms of teaching clarinet, we always want to be asking questions. How does that feel when you did that? Did you notice that as you moved the metronome up, did you notice that your level of tension in your hand or your arm also increased? Isn't that interesting that as we start to go faster, we also start to add more tension in the hand, when in fact, to go faster, we have to have less tension. It's quite a paradox. And so that's an easy thing that somatics can help us with, that has nothing to do with injury. It's just all about effort. Can we, as we increase the tempo, can we release more of the fingers and release more of the arm and get the whole body involved in that? Can we notice more of how the chair and the ground is supporting us in what we're doing, so that we don't have to do all of the work internally? We can dial down the background effort of things so that we have more available to us for our creative work. And my dog is
Love
barking.
that. It's okay. Mine were earlier. So I completely agree with everything Shawn said. I think ultimately, piggybacking on what Shawn said, like I feel like if we can make the goal, just in general in our teaching, to always ask questions and not be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions, even if you don't know the answers. It's okay to not know something. I feel like sometimes as teachers, we feel like we need to know everything and we need to have an answer for everything. But in reality, if somebody's experiencing something in their body, maybe you can't relate to that, or maybe you don't know the answer to, is that how it's supposed to be? Like, that's okay. But that curiosity is what is key for me. And just being willing to think about, how are you communicating this information? I find myself sometimes, especially early on when I started teaching a lot, I would just share what my clarinet teachers told me without thinking about it. Of course, that's what we all do, right? We're teaching what we know. So, I was teaching this technique, and I remember in the middle of that, I was like, wait a minute, is that true? Is that actually? And I literally had to stop myself from going down that rabbit hole in that moment, because I didn't want to take the time in that person's clarinet lesson. That was a clarinet lesson. And so, a lot of times we'll explore those things, but in that moment, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know if I've ever like double checked that. Let me think through that. So after that lesson, I did a deep dive and I just explored some materials and realized, like, that it's not necessarily wrong what I said, what I repeated from my teacher, but maybe there's another way that might resonate with somebody else. So the next lesson that she had, I kind of talked through that. I was like, wait a minute, I've just repeated this because I heard a teacher say this, but can we talk a little bit about that? And so just recognizing that you can still be curious and you can still learn, and you don't have to have all the answers.
That's such a great reminder. Do you both use some of these techniques with younger students too? Like, do you ask the same kind of questions with students regardless of their age or how long they've been playing for?
I mean, I typically don't teach younger students regularly. I'll go do clinics for middle school or high schoolers. Um, and generally, when I do that, I'm more focused on clarinet. Um, but yes, there are some techniques in which I would most certainly use with the younger students. And there's certain little prompts that you can say or have them do that can really make a big impact without having to go into a deep discussion about, okay, well, this is how the body's constructed, this is this. It's no, when you're teaching middle school and high school, you need to have some quick instructions so that they can do something. Like, for instance, when I see students, if I go to do a clinic and I see students kind of slumping in their chair, or the opposite, in which they're like, sitting at the edge of their chair and they're really like, arching their back because they want to do well for you. I'll be like, or maybe they're getting distracted. It's the end of the day and they're just kind of all over the place. I'll say, okay, I want everyone to stand up. And great. All right, everyone's standing up. Now take a look at where your chair is, and I make it silly. I make it fun. And then I'll say, great, I want you to sit down, knees forward, hips back, knees forward, hips back. And I demonstrate, and I'll make it fun. I don't mean knees forward, hips back, I mean, let's do it simultaneously. Knees forward, hips back. And then I have them look around the room. Boom. Everyone is sitting really, really well. So having some certain different prompts in instructions that can get to your end result without having to go into a big discussion are fantastic to have.
Keep it fun, keep it silly.
Oh yeah.
Thank you. So especially along the lines of working with students, so often my college students ask me if they can return to a piece that they played in high school or many, many years ago. And so, Shawn, in chapter 3 of the book, you share your story about revisiting Muczynski timepieces like 17 years after you had learned it. And you went to an older body map that you had from playing that piece. And I thought it was really amazing that you listened to your body and you had that kind of awareness to know that, okay, I have pain while I'm practicing. I need to do something different. And so, based on this experience, how would you recommend that clarinetists either revisit a piece, and how can they keep a similar awareness? And do you use similar thoughts as you learn a new piece as well?
Uh, I think what's important to know is that anytime you go back to something, you're going to go back to whatever the map was when you first learned it. So for me, Mozart goes back to sophomore year of high school. I'm suddenly 15 years old again. Uh, and I sit the same way and I have to go, okay, no, I'm 47 now. I'm not 15. I know different things now about my body. Um, but what's interesting is that with that story is I was well into practicing before I went, I heard, duh. Like how many hours have I taught this? But of course, I'm not immune to making the same mistakes, you know. Uh, and so I think, we need to understand everything's connected. When you're learning a piece of music, um, let's talk about going back first. If you're going to go back to something that you already know, some things that you can do to kind of help prevent this thing, buy a new piece of music. Or if it's something that is always uh, printed with the same pagination so that, like the first page is always on the right, then cut it up and put the first page on the left so that it looks different to you. That is enough to trick the brain into going, okay, this is new. And don't transfer all of your marks. Let it be a fresh experience so that you have a little bit of curiosity as you come to it. With a new piece of music, you want to realize that everything that you do while you're learning that piece is being coded into that piece of music. So you want to start from the very beginning with exactly what it is that you're going to do when you perform this. Don't wait to do the full dynamics. Learn that passage at fortissimo. Learn this passage at pianissimo. Don't wait until later to add those elements in. If you're gonna play a piece sitting, always sit. Like excerpts. Do not ever practice excerpts standing. You're never going to stand in an orchestra and play them. But it can be completely discombobulating to you if you practice them standing and then all of a sudden you sit down, or you learn a piece sitting, and then suddenly it's your dress rehearsal and you're standing for the first time, or the first time you play with the pianist and you're standing. It's like, I feel like I've never played this piece before. Like, we've all had that experience because the recipe has changed. So when you start learning the technique, from that very first day, think, how am I going to perform this so that the performance is being layered into the learning? And there's no like, okay, now it's learned. Now I have to do the polishing and the extra little bits. Start that from the very beginning, and then it may mean that the learning of it goes a little slower, but trust me, the polishing happens a lot faster. There isn't that disconnect.
I actually have a story about that. So when I was teaching, I started teaching, and I was like, oh, I want to be licensed in body mapping. So I started taking lessons with someone, and I was preparing for it wasn't the first, but it was one of the first faculty recitals at my university. And I was taking body mapping lessons, and I remember committing to myself. I was like, I am going to practice this right. I am going to incorporate all of this information that I'm doing with body mapping. I'm going to work on picking up my clarinet well for 45 minutes in front of the mirror before I play a note, because I need that. And I didn't have a set time necessarily, but it was more of like just practicing. Okay, I can do this with freedom, picking up the clarinet. Once I started feeling more comfortable with that, I would start practicing, and I would practice really well, like how we teach our students to practice. I discovered that it works. But I would do that, and it would be a slow practice. And I remember thinking, like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to learn all this new music by the time my recital comes around. Like, I'm getting nervous. And I was like, no, I'm going to learn this slowly. I'm going to learn this well, and I'm going to pay attention to my body. And that recital was the most fun, the most relaxed I had ever been on stage. It was the best and most like high that I felt on stage ever. And it was so freeing. Because yeah, I maybe halfway through the time frame that I had, maybe I didn't know all the notes, or I didn't have it near the tempo that I probably would have, a year ago or something. But the progress was so much faster because I did that, because I took my time learning and listening to my body and incorporating all of that on the front end. Getting it up to tempo and getting it ready for recital was actually easy. And that never came easy to me before.
This discussion really makes me want to go practice. So I'm so excited after this to go pick up my clarinet in front of the mirror. This is really, really exciting stuff. So a lot of the things that you both mentioned take awareness and take attention. And in chapter 4, this chapter discusses attention strategies and the concept of attention like a flashlight versus attention like a floodlight. So I'm wondering if you can share more about the differences between these two and when you might apply the two of those two.
Go for it, Shawn.
Okay. So first of all, flashlighting and floodlighting, neither one is good nor bad. We need them at all the time. And our nervous system is designed to fluidly go from one to the other. And they work in tandem with each other. So we don't want to create a scenario where flashlighting is bad. And we always want a floodlight. Flashlighting is essentially concentrating. And concentrating for long periods of time is extremely taxing to our nervous system. We're not designed to do that. We're designed to kind of go high resolution for a real brief period of time, gather some really high res data, and then come back up and bring that information with us. And we don't lose anything when we do that. Floodlighting is where we're waiting for information to come to us. We have a curiosity about, what's the next thing that's going to grab our attention? Oh, I'm slightly out of tune. Okay, I fixed that. Oh, they played that phrase slightly different. Then the next time I play that, I'm going to mimic that. Like, those are the beautiful things that happen in a performance when you're having that really golden chamber music, and you catch the turn of a phrase that your collaborator did and you can incorporate it. You do that because you're floodlighting and you're aware of what they're doing, and you have that sort of symbiotic connection where you just sort of have one brain. The problem with when we chronically flashlight, which of course is what we've been trained to do as soon as we went to kindergarten, and we were told, sit still, do this math problem for 45 minutes, and your body's going like, no, I can't, I got to get out of this chair, like, because you've been like a kinesthetic learner for 4 years. You've been up and playing and learning through curiosity and play, and now all of a sudden you have to sit still. And the only way that we can do that is to numb our nervous system. We have to shut it off. And the way that we do that is we quite literally hold ourselves still. We recruit muscles in our body to hold our attention still onto something. Now, we can't make sound without movement. We are movers. No matter how much we would love it to be about the instrument, you are the instrument, and you have to move in order to make that tool that you use in our case, the clarinet, we have to move in order to make that thing create sound. And it's our movement that causes that thing to resonate in the way that it does. It's the quality of our movement that determines the quality of the sound that we make on the instrument. Now, if we're starting with the brake pedal on, we're limiting our capacity from the very beginning. And again, if we're looking for fluidity and ease and that direct connection from creativity to action, we want to, that work begins with paying attention to how we're paying attention. And so many of us don't even know that we can do that, that's a skill. And we have control over that. We get to choose, we get to set the intention that we want. And so, you know, we're encouraging you to kind of flow between them, you know, get some high res detail and then come back up. And, oh, okay, something else is pulling my attention. Let's follow that down that rabbit hole. Okay, and come back up. And then, you know, and back and forth. And you'll find that you can maintain a practice session for much longer than if you tried to just really zone in on something with a high level of focus. You can really only do that for about 22 to 27 minutes before your brain says, nope, I'm fried. That's it. But if you kind of drop down and then come back up and drop down and come back up, you can maintain, you know, a pretty high level of attention for about 90 minutes before you need a break.
Thank you so much for that. That clarifies a lot for me when I was reading that chapter and the entire book too. So thank you so much, Shawn.
It is something that you have to practice. You can't wait till you're on stage to try and do it. It's like Jackie and I were saying about the previous question. It's a part of how you practice. Start with your scales, start with your long tones, and start setting an intention with your attention. And the more that you do it, the more second nature it will become.
I'm sure that we've all had a student out there that, you know, will say, oh, well, I'm not worried about the dynamics or the phrasing yet. Like, I'll do that later. I'll do that later. Well, when you're on stage, the last thing that you learn is the first thing to go, right? And if we don't start with that intention, then that's gonna leave us when we're in that stress state of being on stage. So the more you can, in a way, ingrain it because it's part of your process, the more you can make it part of your process, the easier it's going to be to do that on stage. I remember one time, this was in the first class that I ever had in body mapping in Alexander. My teacher would always ask me as I played in class, like, well, what are you feeling? And I was like, I don't know. I don't feel my body. I'm thinking so much about the clarinet. Like, I don't know. Actually, first I started with emotions. I'm mad. I'm sad. but anyway. And I remember the first time I went on stage and I could feel my legs. I could feel my legs were so tight. My toes were gripping the floor and they were so tight. I went to her the next day. I was like, oh my gosh, I felt my legs as I performed. They were so tense. She was like, could you let go? No, but I felt them. And that was the first step. That's the first step, right? And then getting to that point where, oh, I feel it and then I can respond to it. I release it. So it's a process.
I think I'm going to misquote this, what I'm about to share. I think it's James Clear who says in Atomic Habits that when we get into a stressful situation, we fall to the level of our structures.
Good morning.
Or something. Say that again.
I think somebody was just unmuted.
Oh, okay. I think that's the quote that when we get into panic, when we get into stressful situations, we fall to the level of our structures. You want this work, especially about our attention, to be fundamental, just like scales, just like long tones, so that when you get on stage and everything's chaotic, like this is F major, I know I can play F major. I could close my eyes and play F major. Like you want your attention and your attention strategy to be that level of fundamental in your playing. Then you can really use it.
And to do that, I think you have to give yourself permission to mess up.
Mm.
You have to give yourself permission to try it. You have to give yourself permission to, oops, I missed that B flat in F major. Oh, well, life goes on. We don't have to judge it. We don't have to label it, but just allowing yourself to make those mistakes, because that helps you learn, and just trying it. If you don't ever try something, how, like, you won't know if it works for you. So let yourself make mistakes.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you, I know that you mentioned this could be one of those experience moments. So throughout the book, Shawn and Jackie include experiences where you're bringing your awareness and you're bringing your attention to various things. And so, do you have another way to practice this idea of attention? And along those lines, is there um, a specific experience that you share throughout the book that you might be able to walk us through quickly?
So my first reaction is, I'm thinking about constructive rest. That is a practice that is taught in Alexander technique. And for me personally, that was really paramount in my development in this material, and learning how to embody what I was working through. Um, so what it is you're lying on the floor, semi-supine, so your feet are on the floor, knees up towards the ceiling. But you can actually also kind of walk yourself through this as you're sitting. So I'm happy to kind of walk you through it. Or Shawn, would you rather do that? You're okay? Okay.
Go for it.
So so if you want to lie down wherever you are, you're welcome to do that on the floor. Or if you would rather just stay seated or standing, whatever you want to do, that's totally fine. But I would encourage you to close your eyes for a moment, and you're just going to observe. What do you notice in your body? What do you notice around you? What are you hearing? What are you smelling? If you have random thoughts coming into your mind, you can always redirect instead of thinking, okay, let me think about my body again. Let me think about my breathing. And you're just observing. I want you to feel the connection you have with the floor, or if you're sitting with the chair, or if you're standing with your feet. And I want you to think, if you were on the beach, nice warm beach, and you're lying there or standing or sitting, and you're allowing whatever's coming in contact with that sand to sink into that nice warm sand. Allow yourself to release into that sand. You feel the warmth of the sun on top of you. And you can just let go and enjoy that moment. Now I want you to take some nice slow breaths in through the nose. So in through the nose, out through the mouth. Nice long exhale. In through the nose. Long exhale. Now, if you do notice a point of tension in your body, you're welcome to move that area around. You're welcome to move your arm. You're welcome to move your hips. You're welcome to move your arms, shoulders, head, whatever you feel might be tense in some way. Allow yourself to have a little bit of movement. One more breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. You are welcome to open your eyes. I did a really quick version of constructive rest. There's more that we outline in the book, but that was one of the ways that I was really able to connect with my body. Because, well, back then we didn't have the smartphones that we have now. We don't have the constant screens. I find myself constantly on a screen, whether it's my phone, my iPad, my computer, TV, whatever. And there's times where I just have to shut it all off and I have to let myself be with myself. And don't get me wrong, sometimes that's hard emotionally. There's things that like I'm fighting inside, but it's so important. It's so important to allow yourself time to be with you and to allow yourself time to feel what your body is experiencing. I would encourage you to read through the section that we wrote and allow yourself time to kind of play with it and see what works for you and have time for yourself.
And if you combine that with the very first experience in the attention chapter, where you start playing with, like, right now, what's the quadratic equation? Think about the quadratic equation. And notice how your whole, like, it's like your eyes turn around and look up in the back of your head for that memory of the quadratic equation. And when you do that, you hold your breath and you tighten your neck and you create this tension pattern around that. You know, when we start to flashlight something, you'll notice in your performance work, you'll notice first the habit of your attention strategy before you'll notice the attention strategy. So you might be, playing along and, oh, my neck is tense. Oh, I bet I'm really flashlighting this. What if I floodlighted this? That could be a pathway for you, as opposed to trying to do it with the intention of directing your attention. Let the body tell you, and let the body be the teacher for you. We just have to learn to listen to it. We're not good at that. We've turned that switch off. So this is, equally about beginning to listen to those pathways again. And that's, so you combine the constructive rest with this. They go hand in hand really well.
Thank you so much for that to both of you. I would like to turn it over for Q&A, but first, Jackie and Shawn, do you have anything else you'd like to share about the book or about your experience with body mapping and Alexander?
I think I just want to answer one of the earlier questions that was in the chat just real quick about Stephen asked about what is the relationship of our book to Barbara Conable's book on body mapping. And our book is the body mapping text for the Association of Body Mapping Educators. We like to think of, if Barbara weren't retired and if Barbara, had continued to work in the field for the last 25 years and was a clarinetist, that this would be the book that she would have written for clarinet specific. But because we're both heavily interested in Alexander technique and really wanted to write a book that was both for performers and for teachers, to provide teaching techniques. our book goes well beyond what the What Every Musician series covers. But we really wanted to write it for teachers too, for this audience.
Absolutely. It's an evolution, basically, of that foundation book that Barbara Campbell wrote. Shawn and I are very interested in sharing some new information that's come about and our experiences teaching this information. And so there's times where we're experimenting a lot with our students, and we make these big discoveries, and so we're sharing them. And so the foundation is in there, and we've just kind of kept going with it. We made it into our material.
We're also pretty proud of, there's some very cutting edge stuff in there too that we're the only ones who've written about, and we're really proud of those bits and pieces as well. We're quite excited to be on the very edge of the development of this work.
And if anyone wanted to learn more or maybe even learn from you, what are some resources that are available for us?
I believe both Jackie and I have personal websites, and you probably know that I have a company called Embodied that we run a training program together, and we are actually starting a new cohort in January. So if you're interested in learning this material and training to teach this material, there's that option as well. The Association of Body Mapping Educators has a lot of resources on their website as well. If you're interested particularly in the history of this work, and taking the What Every Musician course, and connecting with the broader audience of people who are teaching body mapping, musicians particularly who are teaching body mapping in all of the instruments. Some of the best lessons I've ever had were from not clarinet teachers. Those are when they can get really fun.
My website is jackiemapsmusic.com, and I was going to share the same resources Shawn did. So, short and sweet.
What's the biggest difference between Alexander technique of yesteryear and currently? Alexander technique of, I like this, of yesteryear. Alexander technique of yesteryear was very much connected to the teacher himself, F.M. Alexander, and what he did. And connected to 1920s Victorian style England and that time era. We are interested now in making this information more relevant, making it less about the technique and more about how the technique can help us and how we can benefit from the technique. How can we adapt the technique to our life now, our circumstances, our activities, so that it's no longer just sitting in a chair and standing up and sitting back in a chair and standing up and doing those, very structured movements, which have a great purpose. But sometimes they're, in that realm, there's a disconnect between how does getting in and out of a chair relate to my clarinet playing? Well, guess what? We can just pick the clarinet up and go right to that. And we can teach Alexander technique and body mapping with the clarinet in your hand, or on a horse, or riding a bike, and that's far more effective, I think, when it relates to you specifically. So I think that's probably the biggest change is that, and 100 years of neuroscience and medical advancements.
I have a question. Are you still open?
Yeah, of course.
All right. I've seen a lot of professionals at the latest clarinet conferences. By the way, I was at your Tennessee uh, demonstration and spoke to you a little bit afterwards. I'm sure you don't remember, but in any case, neck straps. I see a lot of professionals wearing neck straps, and I've started because I love the way it relaxes the right arm and hand especially, but the left hand also. But there is a problem with posture and how far up. And anyways, do you have anything to say about that?
Jackie, you want
I'm happy to.
to? Okay.
So it's funny because Shawn and I are a lot alike in so many ways, but also very different. And we complement each other. So we actually have different approaches to this. So Shawn prefers to use a neck strap and uses that contact of the neck strap to the neck as a reminder to pay attention to the whole body and how are we how do we need to organize our bodies. For me personally, I put a neck strap on and I am immediately doing this number, and I really struggle to use that method of like allowing that to be a reminder. I'm not sure why, but that's a struggle of mine. So I found something different. I use the Koeman thumb rests. And those have really changed my playing and my ease of the right hand, moving the right hand. So there are other options. I know that there's some harnesses out there now and things like that. So I love that you're exploring and that you're trying different things. If you're not happy with what you're using, I think explore some more, see what else is out there. Because I mean, just in the last couple of years, there's been more and more developments in neck straps and harnesses and things like that. So yeah, that's what I would say. Shawn, do you have anything to add to that?
Just reiterate, find what works for you. Try and stay away from the we don't play with neck straps, we play clarinet. That it should be comfortable. We are working. So there's effort involved. We're not playing clarinet is not going to be relaxed. We're not hanging out in the lazy boy watching the Super Bowl. There's work, but it shouldn't be painful. So, if I use the stretchy neck strap, but I know some people who love the fixed neck strap. Some people love the saxophone harnesses that have the sort of more structured, and then the clarinet hangs off of that. Some people use the frets where the clarinet sits on the chair. Whatever works, find it and use it unabashedly, and don't apologize for it. Just sound great. And that's your apology is I sound great.
There you go. I have another more specific question for a student of mine that I just met recently, freshman in college. No, she's probably a sophomore, but hasn't played, not a clarinet major. She hadn't played for a few years because she's a music tech major, but she wants to pick up her instrument. Again, actually, I think it's a requirement too that they graduate with some sort of proficiency. But in any case, left hand, and I'll show you if I can here. She's double jointed in her left thumb. So if she does this, she's fine. But as soon as she does this a little bit, brings the thumb up to hit the register key, it collapses it. And she says it causes her a little bit of pain. So she came in asking me about that. And my instinct is to, well, let's go with the body, the most ergonomic way to do it, the Alexander technique, which I'm not an expert at by any means, even though I've taken a few courses. So I know something about the ergonomics there. Do you have any thoughts about that specific problem?
Yeah, and I say this funny, I've always heard of it, and I saw it one time and I was like, I finally saw this map that I'd always heard of, that sometimes we forget that the thumb opposes the fingers. And I had never seen it before until one time I was teaching like a camp that had a bunch of high school and middle school students, and one of the counselors said, Shawn, can you come over here and look and help? And it was something like outside of the clarinet, the student could do all sorts of things, but as soon as the clarinet came in, this is what they did. And so there is a little bit of like, oh, you know that your thumb can do this, and remapping that could be helpful. With that said, hyperlaxicity in the joints is what it is. It's the way your body is made. There's nothing to fix because you're not broken. There's nothing to correct. You can only supplement and complement the way that your body is shaped and designed. So if there's hypermobility and laxicity in this part of your student's hand, then they may need support in that joint in the way of a splint to help that joint not collapse. And there are lots of products that you can get that will do that, even like just like a thumb wrist thing that you can mold. There's a company called Silver Splints that make these really beautiful splints. They look like jewelry. They're expensive, but they last forever because they're sterling silver. But those are some options. Jackie will have a lot more.
I don't know about a lot more. I'm struggling to know what you mean by collapsing. But what I would say is, if you're trying, after you try the opposable thumb and you're thinking about different ways to hold the clarinet, first of all, I like to tell my students to allow the palm of the hand to come closer to the clarinet. For some reason, that helps with the curvature of the fingers, but it also could change the location of the thumb and how the thumb functions. So you could try that. Some of the splints that Shawn was talking about, they actually have some other options too that are a little bit on the cheaper side. I think it's Oval 8 is a company. I just got some on Amazon. They're finger splints, and I got like a ring sizer, basically like the same concept. So it has like one of each size. And then I have my students try them out in lessons. If they like them and they want to purchase them, then they know what size to get. But those are possibilities. There's also, so I looked at the silver ones that Shawn mentioned, and I'm very cheap. So I was like, I wonder if there's something else out there. And there is. There's on Etsy, they actually make lots of different finger splints and thumb splints, and they have different designs. So it might be one of those things where she could find something that's more affordable, and be able to use that, and maybe that would help.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. These are all absolutely wonderful questions. For time's sake, we might wrap it up there, but Shawn and Jackie's websites are both in the chat for you. And the resources that they mentioned, I'll also ask the chair of the Health and Wellness Committee to add this to the ICA Health and Wellness resources portion of the website. So if you want to go back and check, I don't know when that will happen, but we'll make sure that we put those resources up for you to check out as well. I wanted to end really quick with just one quote from the end of the book. I think the end of the book ties everything in so well. And um, thank you, Jackie and Shawn, for being so vulnerable with this work and so vulnerable at the end of the book. Never have I felt like I completely, like, totally trust the author in this way, because they've shared in these experiences. And I love the end of the book too, because it's more of the self-mapping. And one quote that really stuck out to me that I think everyone should hear is, by mapping yourself and as an artist first, you acknowledge that you have your own unique musical view, and that is valuable. What you have to say through your clarinet is valuable to the world because you are the only person who can say that. You are worthy of taking up space to offer your own musical message to the world. We hope this book begins the process of connecting you to your true, authentic self. And I can speak for myself on this, that I now have those thoughts of how can I take up space, and what's important to me that I can share through my clarinet. So thank you both for writing this book. I hope that the entire clarinet community has time to read it over and over again and share this with others, and that this information goes far beyond our clarinet playing and into our lives. And I know that it has for me. So thank you for writing this. Thank you for sharing your expertise. And thank you so much for taking time tonight to share this with us as well. This was really, really wonderful. And thank you all, to the audience too, for coming out tonight too. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you.
And check back soon with the Health and Wellness Committee. I am just finished out my 4-year term, so I don't know what their next book of choice is, but do definitely keep an eye out for an email in a few months to pick up the next book and join them for their next book talk. Thank you all so much. Thank you again, Jackie and Shawn. This has been really wonderful.